Last month, Pakistan and Afghanistan deployed tanks and armoured personnel along their border at Torkham, also known as the Khyber Pass. The resulting escalation led to several casualties. The recent violence was a marked contrast from the optimism and improving ties since Ashraf Ghani took over as president of Afghanistan. In one overture, Ghani ordered action taken against some Taliban militants, known as the TTP, suspected of orchestrating the 2014 school massacre in Peshawar, Pakistan, that killed 141 people, including 132 children. In return, the Afghan president hoped Islamabad would fight members of the Taliban who'd taken up refuge in Pakistan, while bringing others to the negotiating table. Later, we'll talk with a former Afghan diplomat and a Pakistani journalist, as well as a policy analyst. But first, for the latest on the ground, we turn to CCTV's Danial Khan in Islamabad and Catherine James in Kabul. Daniel, let me start with you first. As we said at the top of the program, relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan took a violent turn along the border at Torkham. Now, that fighting appears to have stopped, but what is Pakistan doing to defuse this situation?
Well, Anand, the recent border conflicts at Torkham have left 4 people dead now. Following conflict, Pakistan, through its diplomatic and military channels, has engaged their counterparts in Afghanistan to work out the border issues. Now, experts here say that effective border management is vital for promoting peace, countering terrorism, and strengthening relations between the two countries. Afghanistan for long has opposed any border regulation, for it does not recognize the Durand line, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, the recent building of a gate by Pakistan at Torkham was seen as a move to regularize Torkham, and therefore the incident happened. Now, defense experts in Pakistan say that it is high time that Pakistan and Afghanistan come to some sort of agreement on border management, and if not, then the situation can once again escalate for the worse in the future. Yes, Anand.
Catherine, the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, has said that Pakistan has imposed an, quote, undeclared war on Afghanistan. What does he mean by that?
President Ghani is not referring to these border skirmishes as we've just been discussing. What he's referring to is a decade-and-a-half-year conflict that shows no sign of abating, with an insurgency that is only stronger year on year. And specifically, what he's saying is that while Pakistan has not declared war in the conventional sense of having its military forces fight with the Afghan military forces, it has ostensibly been, in his mind and in many Afghans and in other international players, mind you, there has been a sense that Pakistan has been supporting the insurgency here on the ground in the form of the Taliban and the Haqqani network.
Daniel, what is the Pakistani government's reaction there to Afghan claims that elements within Pakistan's military are supporting militant groups against Afghanistan?
Well, Anand, Pakistan Foreign Office has time and again issued a statement saying that such allegations from Afghanistan will only benefit those who do not want peace inside Afghanistan, and that these statements are unhelpful. We know that Pakistan is already engaged in efforts against terrorism and extremism. The Foreign Office has further said that there is a need for friendly and cooperative engagement between the two countries to work together for promoting peace and stability in Afghanistan and the region at large. But at the same time, a number of incidents have taken place in the recent past where spies belonging to the Afghan intelligence agencies have been arrested inside Pakistan, who were living inside the Afghan refugee camps. Now, there are over 3 million Afghan refugees living inside Pakistan, and the date of their repatriation has been extended time and again since the year 2007. Now, experts say that it is now time for the Afghan refugees to go back home, as one of the reasons of terrorism is the cross-border movement that allegedly brings in terrorist elements from Afghanistan inside Pakistan.
Catherine, the Pakistan Taliban's new chief, Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada, has warned of continued conflict until what he called the occupation of Afghanistan ends. Now, China, the United States, Pakistan and Afghanistan are members of the Quadrilateral Coordination Group. That's an effort to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. What are the status of those talks?
Well, these talks are the fifth such talk between these four players took place in May, and that was the last time they all met. But up until this point, there doesn't seem to have been many steps in getting the Taliban to come to the negotiating table, so to speak. Ghani previously had been quite amenable to working together more and more with Pakistan, but this year we've seen that take quite a sharp shift. As we've just mentioned before, that he's now saying that Pakistan has ostensibly waging war in Afghanistan, and we've also seen that any efforts to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table to continue to be thwarted, and the Taliban consistently say that until the US and international forces leave Afghanistan, they are not going to discuss terms for peace.
Thanks, Catherine. That's CCTV's Catherine James reporting from Kabul and Daniel Khan from Islamabad. Joining us here in Washington is Afghanistan's former ambassador to Canada and France, Omar Samad. Ambassador, thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Let's start with a big picture question. How would you characterize Afghanistan's relationship with Pakistan?
At this juncture, I would say it's somewhat cold and dicey. It's not an easy relationship. There was an attempt over the last 2 years, basically an overture by President Ghani when he took office at the end of 2014, to engage Pakistan and also engage other regional countries such as China and the United States to see if it would be possible to get the Taliban to sit at a table and start talking. The Pakistanis were somewhat optimistic. They were giving signs that this would be a possibility, but over time it never happened. So far it hasn't happened, at least. And there were pledges made, there were some commitments that were made, and there was a demand by the Afghan side that in order for everyone to feel somewhat confident, that there has to be a certain level of reduction of violence. And that never happened. On the contrary, violence escalated.
Right, as you point out, on the contrary, violence has escalated. We have tensions which boiled over just as recently as a month ago. There were tanks and armored personnel deployed along their common border. What was the cause of that confrontation?
This is one of many confrontations. This one was more important or somewhat more visible because it happened at the border checkpoint. Right. And there were some casualties. We have issues around the Durand Line, which separates Afghanistan from Pakistan, which Afghanistan traditionally has not recognized as an international border because of its colonial nature and because of the fact that we have not had any type of engagement once the British left this region in the mid-1900s to ratify an agreement with Pakistan, which was a newly formed state back then. So this historic issue has remained, and every time that there is a sense that someone is moving across this line, as far as the Afghans are concerned, it creates tension. It is an issue that at some point or another, I believe, has to be addressed and has to be resolved, because border issues, and we're talking about 2,400 kilometers of borders, can be problematic, but the problem that Afghans have is not really right now a border issue. It's what is happening across the border and what is moving across the border from Pakistan into Afghanistan, and sometimes from Afghanistan into Pakistan in the form of wounded Taliban, or in the form of probably people of Pakistani or other nationalities who come into Afghanistan to fight alongside the Taliban and then have to go back to their homes or whatever. We want to have a system in place and an agreement in place whereby we know that there are no militants crossing into Afghanistan causing havoc, or that there are no arms and munitions and foreign fighters or Pakistani fighters coming into Afghanistan. So that is obviously a thorny issue and has to be looked into.
As you point out, President Ashraf Ghani, since he came to office, has been making overtures to Pakistan. He wants Pakistan to rein in these militant groups that you talk about, to control the movement of arms across the border. Why are his appeals not being heard in Pakistan?
Well, you see, the view in Afghanistan across the board is that Afghanistan's file, if you want, is in the hands of the Pakistani military. It doesn't really it's not really managed or handled by the civilian government. So the civilian government, whether it's Mr. Nawaz Sharif or whether there were others before him, have never really had the last word on Afghan policy. And this is why, if you remember, President Ashraf Ghani, in his first visit to Pakistan as president, went and visited General Raheel Sharif. And he visited all the major players on the military side, because he knew that these are the decision makers. Therefore, what we are seeing is the continuation of a strategy that the Pakistanis have followed for at least 2 decades after the Soviets left, which is to have a friendly, allied government, somewhat subjugated to Islamabad's will in Kabul. They first tried this through Hekmatyar, then they tried it through the Taliban, and now again they are trying it through Taliban and other smaller militant groups. The view in Kabul is that we don't need to have this kind of approach. Pakistanis have to respect Afghan sovereignty. They have to respect the will of the Afghan people through a democratic process. They don't have to force anyone on us, and we don't have to be enemies with them. We don't have to react in any way, because we are neighbors, and we will be neighbors for as long as we exist. So our proposition has been that we need to change the dynamics, and we need to change, basically have a shift in policy and strategy so that we can work together as 2 sovereign nations and not try to outdo each other. And so this is what needs to happen. I think that the Afghan leadership and the Afghan people back them on this, would like to deal with Pakistan as a friendly Muslim neighbor, not more, not less. And if that happens, I think we will be able to resolve a lot of things.
Right, as far as Pakistan is concerned, the one big complication is what Pakistan says is India's disproportionate influence in Afghanistan. Of course, Pakistan and India are arch enemies. Do the Pakistanis have a point there?
They don't. I will be very frank with you. We have heard this for years, and there is really no solid evidence to show that the way Pakistan views the Indian presence and role in Afghanistan is the way that they are describing it.
Because the Pakistani view is that we're going to be surrounded by 2 hostile states.
We are not, as I said earlier, we are by no means willing or agreeing to any other country in our region or beyond coming to our side and being a threat to Pakistan. If you look at the history of Afghan-Pakistan relations, every time that there has been a war between Pakistan and India, Afghanistan has either stayed neutral or has even backed, to some extent, Pakistan's position. So what does that tell you? That the Afghans have no appetite for being used by anybody else against Pakistan. And I think this is a point that the Pakistanis either are ignoring or are not grasping. And we need to make sure that they understand that the Indian presence in Afghanistan is a soft power presence. It's a presence worth $2 billion worth of aid to the Afghan people. It is not a security presence, with very little being done on the security front in terms of training and some munitions and so on and so forth. And we will not allow anyone, India included, to use us as a base against anybody else.
So here you have 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan. These are neighbors, they share a common culture, common heritage, common religion. What would you like to see from Pakistan to build confidence?
I think that Pakistan has to review its outlook, its strategy, and its historic viewpoint on Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a weaker neighbor, there's no doubt. Afghanistan has been weakened by almost 35 years of war. And we are very appreciative of what Pakistan has done for Afghans throughout the period that the Soviets were there. But at the same time, we know very well that Pakistan, after that period, had other motivations and had an agenda that is not driven by friendly sovereign to sovereign, state to state, and people to people basis, on equal basis. We would like them to look at Afghanistan as a neighbor in a country that will never be subjugated, has never been subjugated, and will always try to be friendly, but will also always try to defend its rights and its sovereignty. I think that if Pakistan agrees with that concept, we have no problem whatsoever dealing with any other issues that may be on the table now or later, including, hopefully, Afghan Taliban agreeing to lay down their arms and come to a peace table.
When we look at these kind of tensions rising, is there a role for third-party mediation? China is a big power in that part of the world. Its trade cooperation has reached unprecedented levels with Afghanistan. China is also a member of the Quadrilateral Coordination Group, along with Pakistan. Well, it's Pakistan, Afghanistan, the United States, and China. What role can China play in this?
A very important role. It's a growing role. It's one that is, that has impact because of its close relationship with Pakistan and growing relationship with Afghanistan. I think that China can be a very important interlocutor and a very important facilitator of relations and of trying to convey a message that the international community has been trying to convey for the past 2 decades, and especially over the past decade itself. You see, the Taliban are seen as a threat. In Afghanistan, a threat to Afghan stability. Any militant terrorist group is seen as a threat. And we don't think that they're good or bad Taliban or good or bad terrorists. We think that we need to stop this differentiation, whereby we use one for one purpose, another for another purpose. Either we fight terrorism altogether in a unified manner, without distinction, or we face problems internally and in our region. And this has been what is happening. China has been affected by all of this, and China realizes that it needs to not discriminate or have black and white views on this. China, we hope, will continue to understand what is happening and will continue to play an important role, as well as other countries in the region, including Russia, Iran, and even India.
Of course, the United States has a role as well.
Sure, the United States is committed, at least as we saw a few days ago, NATO and the United States are still committed for the next 3-4 years to making sure that Afghanistan is stabilized and that things
are peaceful. That summit actually committed NATO to provide money and troops as well.
Yes.
Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.